It's 1857, and you're serving in the army of the East India Company, not the British government, a privately run company that runs India. You're a sepoy in their army when your officer hands you a cartridge. To load it into the newly supplied Enfield rifles, you need to bite the cartridges. What's the problem? The problem starts when a rumour starts to go around saying that pig and cow fat are part of the cartridges. If you bite it, your faith is destroyed. If you refuse, you hang. That was Mangal Pandey's choice. And he refused. Mangal Pandey had served the company for years. And on March the 29th, he made his choice. He fired at his commanding officer. And 10 days later, he hung. The British called him a lone fanatic. But just 6 weeks later, India exploded. The company and Britain itself said they never saw this coming. There were no signs, but they were lying. Let's rewind for a second. What was it like to be a sepoy in the army before this? You were on very low pay, with some promised allowances, but they weren't always paid. So you were poor. You could be forced into overseas service, and you may think, well, that's pretty normal in an army, but in a caste-driven society, that could violate the rules. It could make you unclean. And many of these sepoys are from the recently annexed territory of Oudh. How recent? 1856, so just a year before this incident. In response to all of these complaints, the company said, well, you ate the company's salt. To which the sepoys said, were you loyal to the king of the Oudh? The sepoys weren't ungrateful. They were trapped by loyalty to a company that had already betrayed them. Then the British handed them an impossible choice. As we've seen, the Enfield cartridges need to be bitten to be loaded. And the rumours are swirling around that the cartridges contain pig and cow fat. Now, that's a big deal in India because if you look at the religious distribution, you're talking a lot of Muslims and a lot of Hindu people. So that means if it contains pig fat, you're violating the Muslim religion. And if it contains cow fat, you're violating the Hindu religion. So either way, you've pissed off everyone. Refusing to bite them and do your service could lead to you being executed at the extreme. But biting it could lead to social death. Who will trust you? Will your family even respect you anymore? You may become an outcast to your own people. But this wasn't ignorance. The British knew about the rumours. So what happened when a sepoy refused to bite them? That's where we come back to Mandel Pandey. In Barrackpore, on the 29th of March, 1857, Mandel Pandey walks onto the parade ground with a loaded musket. He shouts to his fellow sepoys, by biting these cartridges, we shall become infidels, before firing his musket at Lieutenant Bow. He misses. He then attacks with his sword. General Hearsay arrives, orders the other sepoys to arrest Pandey. They refuse. One sepoy, Sheikh Paltu, decides to help the British. Many of the other sepoys throw stones at his back, threaten to shoot him if he doesn't stop. In the middle of all this is Pandey. He grabs his musket, points at his chest, and pulls the trigger. He's severely wounded, but he did not succeed with killing himself. There's a trial of sorts. At trial, he says, I acted alone. No one encouraged me. And the British response to this tells you everything you need to know about the system. Pandey's official execution is scheduled for the 18th of April, but feeling scared, they move it forward by 10 days. Jemadar Ishwari Prasad, the officer who refused to arrest him, also executed. The one sepoy who helped the British, Sheikh Paltu, promoted on the spot, but murdered by his own people 2 weeks later. One man refused. They destroyed everyone around him, but they couldn't kill the idea. The British claimed surprise, but the warnings were there. In 1853, so 4 years before this, Ernest Jones, a writer back in England, talks about the greed and nepotism of the company and how it runs India. So rumours are starting to get back to the homeland. The Madras lawyer John Bruce Norton warned of widespread hatred, and so there was enough disaffection for 6 rebellions. The native press in India are openly talking about overthrowing the company's rule. No one's hiding anything. Well, not the people without power anyway. The British Parliament receives petitions from injured subjects. There's talk of them being flooded with complaints. The information was reaching the administrators of the company. It was reaching London. It was going right to the very top. So why didn't anyone act? Let's start at the bottom of the rung. As a local officer in the company, your job is to civilize India. If you report the dissent, you've admitted you failed. So you don't report it. But let's say one person does. One person who's concerned about what's happening. They take it up the ladder. You're a mid-level administrator in the company. Your goal is to get promotion. And the way to promotion is to sell an optimistic vision to those above you. You talk about how good a job you're doing, how much civilizing you're doing, all these wonderful things that the British say they're doing. If your higher-ups hear of any incidents, you just say it's 1 or 2 fanatics, nothing to worry about. You've got it all under control. To the senior leadership, well, they've brought railways and telegraphs to India. They've civilized it. Any dissent is just noise. You don't need to worry about that. But let's say somehow this dissent has worked all the way up to this level. What happens then? Say this one extra good person decides to pass it on. At the East India Company headquarters back in London, bad news was a risk to you. So let's say you hear news of 135,000 Indian soldiers being disloyal to the company. So what? I mean, you've lost control, sure, but it's more than that to them. They're a business. They're a publicly traded business. Admitting you've lost control of your crown jewel, the thing that you're getting all of your money from, the thing that you're bleeding dry for as much money as you can, and becoming incredibly rich yourself with, well, that'll cause the stock price to crash. That could threaten the existence of the whole company. Staying silent was in their best interest. Suppress information at all costs. At every career level, the rational move was to suppress bad news. The system wasn't designed to be blind. It just rewarded blindness at every level. Same difference. But it gets worse. They didn't just ignore the warnings, they silenced them. When newspapers try and publish what's happening, the British issue gag orders. They stop it being published. And they say that the purpose of the censorship is screen the cowardice and incapacity of the real authors of the revolution. Let's be clear. The real authors of these potential rebellions are the administrators of the company. They're the ones who have turned down every opportunity to try and put a lid on things, to try and improve things. But no, what they mean by real authors is people actually saying out loud what's happening. That's who needs to be silenced. Some describe the administrators of the company as so wedded to the perfection of the Indian government, as in their government, that they couldn't imagine any problems with it. They couldn't imagine that anyone would be ungrateful enough to say that it was bad. And all in the name of protecting those administrators, those poor administrators. You know, they're earning probably the equivalent of millions. But to protect their reputation, the British people are kept completely in the dark. And this wasn't incompetence. They had a feeling something was coming. They just hoped they could keep it quiet. It was a cover-up before the disaster happened. Let's get back to 1857. Even after the execution of Pandy and others, and the disbanding of a whole unit, the problem's still there. In the aftermath of Pandy's execution, 90 sepoys are ordered to use the cartridges. 85 say no. On the 9th of March, they're court-martialed and sentenced to 10 years hard labour for refusing to bite a cartridge that could ruin them socially and religiously. Not only that, they're stripped of their uniform and shackled in front of the whole garrison, clearly an attempt to humiliate them. The next day, Meerut, where they're based, explodes. Some of the remaining sepoys break into the jail, free the 85 prisoners, and kill the officers guarding them. And the next day, they arrive in Delhi. Why Delhi? Well, the last empire to rule India before the British, in some form or another, was the Mughal Empire. They've largely lost power by this point. They declare Bahadur Shah Zafar as the Emperor of India. This is a clear signal that the rebellion is against British rule. They're starting the propaganda. The collapse was not sudden. It was the sound of a creaking system finally shattering, and the people in charge had refused to hear it until it was too late. The official line, the company line, the British line was that they were only there to bless the people. They were benevolent. They were doing what was in the best interests of the Indians. A month later, in June, the rebellion had spread. And in Cawnpore, the British were about to learn what happens when you build a system that can't hear warnings, even when they're shouted directly at your face. General Hugh Wheeler is in charge of Cawnpore. He's been in India for 54 years. He's married to an Indian woman. He speaks many of the languages. He had absolute faith in the loyalty of his men. So much so that he sent 2 regiments away to help in Lucknow. Local businessman Nanak Chand warned the British, Nana Sahib is planning something. They confront Nana. He denies everything, saying if anything he's going to protect them. They believe him. And on June the 5th, the sepoys of Cawnpore rebel. And in response, Wheeler retreats to a dry earthen entrenchment. No shade, no water, June heat. The sepoys mount a siege that lasts 3 weeks. Amongst the besieged, dysentery and cholera spread like wildfire. Then the hospital catches fire. Wounded men are burnt alive. Under heavy artillery fire, Wheeler's own son is decapitated. Desperate, Wheeler sends a message to Lucknow, begging for help. Surely we are not to die like rats in a cage. Lucknow can't help. They're under siege. Only now does he realise how big this is. On June the 27th, Wheeler surrenders. And Nana Sahib offers him safe passage to Allahabad. And at Sachichara Ghat, the remaining British people climb onto thatched roof boats. They're exhausted, sick. Many are unable to walk. And then someone fired a gun. Flaming arrows fly through the air. Many land on the boat, setting it alight. Bodies of those that have been shot, burned, or drowned start to clog the river. Those who manage to swim for shore are caught and hacked to death. And 3 days before his 68th birthday, General Wheeler dies. Now, having ignored all the warnings, the British were paying the price. But they weren't the only ones who would. The surviving women and children are moved to a small building in Cawnpore, the Bibigarh, or the House of Ladies. 40 feet by 50 feet, 2,000 square foot total, 200 people crammed inside. We're now into July. It's still very hot. There's no food. The dysentery and other diseases are still spreading amongst the survivors. 2 weeks pass when Nana Sahib hears news that a British regiment is on its way. He orders that they kill the prisoners. But the sepoys refuse. They won't go that far. But sadly, that's not where it ends. He calls in literal butchers. An hour later, 200 women and children are dead. The bodies are thrown down a well. But there's a miracle. The next day, 3 women and 3 children are found alive, buried under all the bodies. They're thrown into the well, effectively buried alive. 2 days later, the British arrived to see the bloody walls. Those same walls show marks of children's handprints. They find many signs of atrocities, and then they discover the well. Remember Cawnpore becomes the battle cry. The British called what came next retribution. The Indians called it the Devil's Wind. Colonel James Neal has been sent to break these sieges, to take back control of India. He went on a path of destruction from Benares to Allahabad. Villages are burned. Men are hanged at crossroads without trial. People are shot, stabbed, and set on fire. Eventually Havelock arrives and tells him to stop. He's already killed 6,000 Indians. For the next 3 months, carts were wheeled around to collect the dead bodies, were piling up day by day. Sunrise to sunset. The death was on a scale that they needed infrastructure. They collected corpses from crossroads to marketplaces. It was indiscriminate. People at the time report that the smell of bodies is poisoning the air of the city. After the Bibigar incident at Cawnpore with the women and children, captured Indians are taken there and told to lick the blood off the walls. Hindus are forced to eat beef. Muslims are forced to eat pork. Muslims are also sewn into pigskins before being hung. At every level, they tried for maximum humiliation. Some Hindus believe that a scattered body leads to a wandering soul. Load a live person into a cannon and fire them out of it. Limbs fly everywhere. There would be no peace or relief for these Hindus in the afterlife. And the people doing it knew that that's what the effect would be. One observer's description: human fragments of heads, arms, and legs. And we know so much because so many of these British soldiers wrote home about it. They describe killing Indians almost as sport. One quote that survives talks of peppering away at niggers. Captain Garnet Wolseley visited Bibigar. The idea that a native should have dared to put his hands upon an Englishman was too much. An all-absorbing craving for ruthless revenge. That most unchristian of passions was deep in our hearts. On the Indian side, deaths amount to 800,000, both from the immediate rebellion and the famine that follows. This great British Empire that claimed to civilize responded with industrial cruelty. And the twist that was never acknowledged by the British: Neal's massacres mostly happened before the discovery of Bibigar, before it even happened. The killing of women and children was not what started the British cruelty. It was that cruelty that caused those people to respond in that way. When they heard that the British were on their way to Bibigar, they knew what was coming for them. They'd heard the stories. They took preemptive revenge. As one historian put it, Neal's barbarities were not revenge for Cawnpore. Cawnpore was revenge for O'Neill. In 1858, after everything that happened, the deaths on both sides, but mostly on one, the company was abolished. The British took direct control over India. But did anything change? The idea they sold themselves is that they were educating the Indians to be able to rule themselves, to make them fit to rule themselves. They weren't ready yet, but they would be after the British were done with them. But all this violence and rebellion had shown one thing: the British were merely human. The air of superiority was gone. The system that couldn't hear warnings before 1857 built the next century of resistance. But Ernest Jones, back in Britain, watching it all unfold from afar, had this to say: if they massacre us, we taught them how. And just 8 years later, it was the Jamaicans' turn to have a taste of British revenge. Watch this to see how a different system didn't listen until it was too late.